Sergeant Thomas Wright had learned to read silence. After 11 years serving in the Royal Protection Command, he understood that quiet didn't always mean peace. Sometimes it meant someone was hiding something. He noticed it first on a Tuesday afternoon. Princess Charlotte walked past him in the East Gallery, returning from a private tea with Queen Camilla. The young princess usually acknowledged the guards with a small smile, maybe a polite nod. Today, nothing. Her eyes stayed fixed on the carpet, her shoulders pulled slightly forward, like she was trying to make herself smaller. Wright kept his expression neutral, his posture unchanged. But his mind registered the detail, filed it away. 3 days later, he saw it again. Femme Charlotte emerged from the state dining room, where she'd been helping arrange flowers with Camilla for an upcoming reception. Standard activity, nothing unusual about it, except Charlotte's left hand kept moving to her scalp. Not scratching, just touching, checking. Her fingers found the same spot repeatedly near her right temple. "Your Royal Highness," Wright said gently as she passed. "Are you quite well?" Charlotte stopped. For just a moment she looked like she wanted to say something. Her mouth opened slightly. Then she glanced back toward the dining room door. "I'm fine, thank you," she said, quietly. Too quietly. She walked away faster than necessary. Wright had spent years overseas before joining Royal Protection. Multiple deployments had taught him one essential truth. People in distress showed it in small ways first. A change in routine, different body language, avoiding eye contact. Charlotte was doing all three. He made a mental note, kept watching. The following Monday brought another detail. Wright was stationed near the music room when he heard voices. Camilla's tone carried that particular quality she used when she wanted something done her way immediately. "Stand still, Charlotte. Stop fidgeting." "I'm sorry, Your hair is a complete disaster. How many times must we discuss proper presentation?" Wright couldn't see them. The door stood partially closed, but he heard the tension in Charlotte's voice when she responded. "Yes, ma'am, I understand." A pause. Then Charlotte's voice again, smaller this time. "Ow, that hurts." "Oh, don't be so dramatic. I'm barely touching you." Another pause. Wright's hand moved fractionally closer to his radio. "Not obvious, just ready." "There," Camilla said. "Much better. Now go wash your face. You look like you've been crying." "I wasn't, Charlotte." Yes, ma'am." The door opened. Charlotte walked out quickly, her hand once again going to that same spot on her scalp. This time, Wright saw her eyes, red around the edges. She'd absolutely been crying. But before we continue, make sure you hit subscribe. Drop a comment below where you're watching from. Now, back to what happened next. Wright waited until Charlotte disappeared around the corner. Then he did something he'd never done in 11 years of service. He walked to the music room and looked inside. Camilla stood by the mirror, adjusting her own hair. Perfectly calm, perfectly composed. She caught his reflection in the glass. "Yes, Sergeant." "Just routine check, ma'am, making sure everything's secure." "Everything's fine." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "You may go." Wright nodded and stepped back. But as he turned, he noticed something on the antique side table near the doorway. Several long, light brown hairs. The same shade as Charlotte's, more than you'd expect from simply fixing a child's ponytail. He didn't touch them, didn't mention them, just noted their presence and continued his rounds. That night, lying in his small apartment in staff quarters, Wright couldn't stop thinking about it. Years of military service had taught him the difference between coincidence and pattern. One incident meant nothing. 2 incidents suggested possibility. 3 incidents demanded attention. Charlotte had changed her behavior around Camilla. That was fact 1. Charlotte showed physical discomfort, specifically related to her hair and scalp. That was fact 2. Camilla had been alone with Charlotte multiple times recently, and each time Charlotte emerged quieter, more withdrawn. That was fact 3. Wright sat up in bed, checked the time on his bedside clock. 11:30. Too late to call anyone official. Too early to ignore what his instincts were screaming. He grabbed his laptop and logged into the internal security system. Every Royal Protection officer had access to review footage from their assigned areas. It was part of the job. Checking for security vulnerabilities, confirming details after incidents, maintaining proper records. Wright pulled up the archive from the past 2 weeks. Started with the East Gallery camera that covered the entrance to the music room. And the footage from Monday afternoon loaded. He watched Charlotte and Camilla enter the music room at 14 minutes past 3. Watched them disappear inside. The door remained partially open, but the camera angle didn't show the interior. 16 minutes later, Charlotte emerged. Wright paused the footage, zoomed in on her face. Even in black and white security footage, you could see she'd been crying. Her hand went immediately to her scalp. The same spot, always the same spot. Wright clicked back through the recordings, found the previous Friday, Charlotte and Camilla in the white drawing room. The camera there had better coverage. He could actually see them both, though no audio accompanied the footage. Camilla stood behind Charlotte, appearing to fix the young princess's hair. Her hands moved through Charlotte's hair once, twice. Then on the third motion, something changed. Camilla's grip tightened. Charlotte's head jerked back slightly. Her shoulders went rigid. Wright leaned closer to the screen. Camilla wasn't fixing Charlotte's hair. She was pulling it. Not violently, not dramatically, but deliberately. Firmly enough that Charlotte's entire posture showed pain. The interaction lasted maybe 5 seconds. Then Camilla released her grip, smiled, patted Charlotte's shoulder, said something Wright couldn't hear. Charlotte nodded, her hand rising toward her scalp before she caught herself and lowered it again. Wright felt something cold settle in his stomach. He clicked through more footage, found another instance from the previous Wednesday. Same pattern. Camilla ostensibly helping Charlotte with her appearance. Charlotte's head pulled back at an unnatural angle, and her face showing clear distress for just a few seconds before Camilla released her. This wasn't discipline. This wasn't fixing a child's hair. This was deliberate infliction of pain disguised as grooming, and based on the footage, it had been happening repeatedly. Wright sat back from his laptop. His training said, document everything, collect evidence, follow proper channels. His instincts said this needed to stop now. He thought about Charlotte's face today, the way she'd wanted to tell him something but couldn't, the way she'd looked back at that door like she was afraid of what might happen if she spoke. Wright thought the hardest part would be deciding whether to act. He was wrong. The real nightmare was figuring out who to trust with this information. The next morning, Wright arrived for his shift at 6:30. He'd barely slept. I kept seeing that footage, Charlotte's head jerking back. Camilla's controlled smile afterward. The casual cruelty of it. He needed to talk to someone. But who? Camilla was Queen Consort. Going over her head meant involving King Charles, and Wright had no idea how that would be received. Going directly to William and Kate felt like overstepping his position. The decision was made for him at 8:15. Charlotte appeared in the corridor outside the morning room. Wright was stationed nearby. She walked slowly, her eyes scanning the hallway, until she spotted him. She approached hesitantly. "Sergeant Wright?" "Yes, Your Royal Highness?" Charlotte glanced around, made sure no one else was nearby. Then she lowered her voice to barely above a whisper. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." She hesitated. Her hand moved toward her scalp, then dropped back to her side. She'd learned to catch herself doing it. If a person was doing something that hurt, but they said it was just normal, would that be okay?" Wright felt his chest tighten. He kept his voice gentle. "No, Your Royal Highness. If something hurts, it's not okay, even if someone says it's normal." Charlotte's eyes went slightly glassy. She blinked rapidly. What if telling someone would make things worse? Telling someone who cares about you never makes things worse. It makes things safer. A door opened down the hall. Camilla's voice carried into the corridor. Charlotte, where did you go, darling? Charlotte's entire body tensed. She looked at Wright with an expression that would haunt him for years afterward. Fear mixed with resignation, and the look of a child who knew what was coming and couldn't escape it. I have to go, she whispered. Your Royal Highness, if you need... Charlotte? Camilla appeared at the end of the corridor. Her smile looked painted on. There you are. Come along. We have much to do today. Charlotte walked toward her. Slow steps, reluctant steps. When she reached Camilla, the Queen Consort placed a hand on Charlotte's shoulder. Squeezed just slightly too hard. Wright saw Charlotte wince. Say goodbye to Sergeant Wright, dear. Goodbye, Sergeant Wright. Her voice was flat, empty. They turned the corner together. Wright stood alone in the corridor, every instinct screaming that he'd just watched a child walk back into harm's way. He pulled out his phone, sent a brief, carefully worded message to Captain Richard Wells, his direct superior in the Royal Protection Command. Need to discuss security concern. Priority escalation. Today, if possible. The response came back within 3 minutes. My office. 1000 hours. Wright had 2 hours to figure out exactly how to explain what he'd seen. 2 hours to find the right words to accuse the Queen Consort of deliberately hurting a child without sounding like he'd lost his mind. He spent those 2 hours reviewing footage again, taking screenshots, building a timeline, making sure he had concrete evidence, not just suspicions. At precisely 10 o'clock, Wright knocked on Captain Wells's office door. Enter. Wells sat behind an immaculate desk, his uniform perfectly pressed. 30 years of service showed in the weathered lines around his eyes. He'd seen everything, dealt with everything, and nothing surprised him anymore. Wright closed the door behind him. Sir, what I'm about to show you involves a member of the royal family. I need you to understand. I wouldn't bring this forward unless I was certain. Wells's expression didn't change. Understood. Continue. Wright placed his laptop on the desk, opened the first video file. This is footage from last Friday. White drawing room, 14:23 hours. They watched in silence. Camilla's hands in Charlotte's hair. The sudden jerk of Charlotte's head. The brief moment of visible pain. Camilla's smile afterward. Wright opened the next file. Then, the next. Each one showing the same pattern. Different days, different rooms. Always when they were alone, or nearly alone. Always the same technique. Pull hard enough to hurt. Release. Act like nothing happened. Wells watched all of it without speaking. When the last video finished, he sat back in his chair. How long have you been documenting this? I started noticing changes in Princess Charlotte's behavior approximately 10 days ago. I reviewed footage going back 2 weeks. Found 6 separate incidents. Have you spoken to anyone else about this? No, sir. You're the first. Wells nodded slowly. His fingers drummed once on the desktop. Then he reached for his phone. This goes to Prince William immediately. No delay, no standard channels. Wright felt relief flood through him. He'd made the right call, brought it to the right person. Sir, you should return to your post and continue normal duties. Say nothing to anyone. I'll handle the escalation. Wells paused. You did the right thing. Right. This stops today. Wright returned to his post outside the east corridor. Everything looked normal. Footmen moved between rooms. Staff prepared for the afternoon's scheduled events. Life in the palace continued its usual rhythm. But Wright couldn't shake the image from his mind. Charlotte's face when she'd asked if something could still be wrong, even when someone said it was normal. That question came from experience, from repeated incidents, from a child learning to doubt her own pain. An hour passed, then another. Wright maintained his position, his expression professional and neutral. Inside, his mind wouldn't stop turning over the possibilities. What was William's reaction going to be? Would Charles get involved? Would Camilla somehow find out she was being investigated? At 1:15, Wright's radio crackled. "Wright, report to Captain Wells, conference room 3. Acknowledged." Wright made his way through the palace corridors. Conference room 3 was tucked away in the administrative wing. Private, soundproofed, used for sensitive discussions that needed to stay confidential. He opened the door and stopped. Prince William stood by the window, arms crossed, jaw tight. Captain Wells sat at the table, and beside him, a woman Wright recognized as Detective Inspector Sarah Chen from the Metropolitan Police's Royal Protection Unit. "Sergeant Wright," Wells said. "Please close the door." Wright did. The click of the latch sounded unnaturally loud. William turned from the window. His expression was controlled, but Wright could see the anger burning beneath the surface. The kind of anger that came from someone trying very hard not to explode. Captain Wells has shown me the footage," William said quietly. "All of it." Wright stood at attention. "Yes, sir. My daughter came to you this morning. Told you something hurt, but the person said it was normal." "Yes, sir. She seemed frightened, conflicted." William's hands clenched briefly, then relaxed. "Charlotte has been having nightmares. My wife and I noticed it about a week ago. She wouldn't tell us what was wrong. Said everything was fine." He paused. "Children don't have nightmares about nothing." Detective Inspector Chen leaned forward. "Sergeant Wright, I need to ask you some questions. Walk me through exactly what you observed, starting from the first time you noticed unusual behavior." Wright spent the next 20 minutes detailing everything. Charlotte's changed demeanor, the way she touched her scalp, of the overheard conversation in the music room, the hairs on the side table, Charlotte's question this morning. Chen took notes, asked clarifying questions. Her expression remained professionally neutral, but Wright caught the tightness around her eyes when he described Charlotte's fear in the corridor. "The footage shows a pattern," Chen said. "Multiple incidents over at least 2 weeks, possibly longer. The behavior is deliberate, targeted, and disguised as normal grooming." She looked at William. "Sir, this constitutes child abuse, regardless of who the perpetrator is." William's face went pale, then flushed. "I want her nowhere near my daughter, as of right now." "We need to handle this carefully," Wells said. "If we move too quickly, too obviously, it could create complications. The Queen Consort has significant—" "I don't care what complications it creates." William's voice was steel. "Charlotte is 8 years old. She's being hurt by someone who's supposed to be family. There are no complications that matter more than stopping that." Chen nodded. "Agreed. But Captain Wells has a point about approach. We need to gather additional evidence if possible. Ideally, we need someone to witness an incident directly, not just on camera." Wright spoke before he could second-guess himself. "I volunteer." 3 pairs of eyes turned to him. "If Princess Charlotte is scheduled for any more private time with the Queen Consort, put me on close protection. I'll maintain appropriate distance, but keep visual contact. If anything happens, and I'll intervene immediately." "That could put you in an extremely difficult position," Wells said. "The Queen Consort could make serious trouble for you." "I understand, sir, but Princess Charlotte asked me this morning if telling someone would make things worse. I told her it wouldn't. I meant it." William studied Wright for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Make it happen, Captain." What Wright didn't know yet was that Camilla had already planned another private session with Charlotte for that very afternoon. And this time, the confrontation would be impossible to ignore. The schedule arrived at 1400 hours. Charlotte was expected in the blue drawing room at 15:30 for what was listed as deportment instruction. Standard royal training, nothing unusual. Except Wright now knew what really happened during those private sessions. Wells called him 20 minutes before. You're on close protection. Stay within visual range. If you see anything that concerns you, intervene immediately. Prince William has given you full authority. Understood, sir. Wright positioned himself in the corridor, adjacent to the blue drawing room. The door would remain open per protocol when a child was involved in any formal instruction. He'd have a clear sightline without being intrusive. Charlotte arrived at exactly 15:30. She walked slowly. Wright noticed she'd braided her hair tightly that morning, probably trying to make it harder for Camilla to grab. "Good afternoon, Sergeant Wright," she said quietly as she passed. "Good afternoon, Your Royal Highness." She gave him a small, sad smile, and then she entered the blue drawing room. Camilla was already there, seated in one of the gilt chairs near the fireplace. She looked up as Charlotte entered, her smile bright and warm. The kind of smile that would look perfect in photographs. The kind that disappeared the moment cameras weren't watching. "Charlotte, darling, come sit. We have much to work on today." Charlotte sat in the chair across from her, kept her hands folded in her lap, her back straight, everything perfect and proper. Wright positioned himself where he could see them both clearly, pulled out his phone as if checking messages, actually activated the voice recording app. Everything was about to be documented. "Your posture has improved," Camilla said, "but your hair—" She stood, moved behind Charlotte's chair. "Really, Charlotte, this braid is far too tight. It looks severe, unfeminine. Mum helped me with it this morning. She said it looked nice. Well, your mother doesn't always understand proper presentation." Camilla's hands moved to Charlotte's braid. "Let me fix it." Wright watched Camilla's fingers work at the braid, pulling it loose, rougher than necessary. Charlotte's shoulders tensed. "Hold still." "I am holding still." "Don't argue with me, Charlotte." The braid came undone. Camilla's hands moved through Charlotte's hair, ostensibly smoothing it. But Wright saw the moment it changed, saw Camilla's fingers twist into Charlotte's hair near the scalp, saw her grip tighten. Charlotte gasped. "That hurts." "Oh, don't be dramatic." Camilla pulled harder. Charlotte's head jerked back. "You need to learn to tolerate a bit of discomfort. Royal women don't complain about every little thing." Tears appeared in Charlotte's eyes. She gripped the arms of her chair. "Please stop." "I'll stop when your hair looks presentable." Wright moved. 3 strides brought him to the doorway. "Ma'am, I need to interrupt." Camilla's hands froze. She didn't release Charlotte's hair, just held it, twisted in her fingers, while she turned her head to look at Wright. "Sergeant, this is a private lesson. You may wait outside." "I'm afraid I can't do that, ma'am." Wright kept his voice level, professional. "I need you to step away from Princess Charlotte." Camilla's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" "Step away from Princess Charlotte. Now." For a moment, nobody moved. Then Camilla released Charlotte's hair and stepped back, her expression shifting from surprise to cold fury. "How dare you speak to me that way? Do you have any idea who I am?" "Yes, ma'am. I also have direct orders from Prince William regarding Princess Charlotte's safety. You're not to have unsupervised contact with her." Camilla's face flushed. "This is absurd. I was helping the child with her appearance. Something her mother apparently can't manage properly." Charlotte remained frozen in the chair, one hand rising slowly to her scalp. Wright could see red marks where Camilla's fingers had gripped. "Princess Charlotte," Wright said gently. "Are you all right?" Charlotte looked between Wright and Camilla. The fear in her eyes was heartbreaking. She wanted to tell the truth, but years of being taught to be polite, to not make trouble, warred with the pain and fear. Her voice trembled. "It hurt. When she pulled my hair, it really hurt." Camilla's expression hardened. "Charlotte, that's enough. You're being overdramatic and rude. Apologize to Sergeant Wright for wasting his time." "No," Wright said firmly. "She doesn't need to apologize. She needs to come with me. He extended his hand toward Charlotte. She looked at it like it was a lifeline. Charlotte, stay in that chair, Camilla ordered. Her voice had gone icy. This man is overstepping his authority. You will, Your Royal Highness, Wright said, speaking directly to Charlotte and ignoring Camilla entirely. Your father asked me to make sure you're safe. Will you come with me, please? Charlotte stood, walked past Camilla without looking at her, took Wright's hand. Her small fingers gripped his tightly, trusting him completely. Camilla's fury was palpable. This is completely unacceptable. I'll be speaking to the king about this. You'll lose your position. That's your right, ma'am. Wright turned, keeping Charlotte slightly behind him. But right now, I'm taking Princess Charlotte to her parents. He walked Charlotte out of the blue drawing room. Neither of them looked back. As soon as they were in the corridor, Charlotte started shaking. Not crying, just trembling from the adrenaline and fear working their way out of her small body. You're safe now, Wright said quietly. I promise you're safe. She's going to be so angry. Let her be angry. You told the truth. That took a lot of courage. They made their way through the palace corridors. Wright kept Charlotte close, his hand on her shoulder. Protective. Several staff members glanced their way curiously, but said nothing. Wright's radio crackled. Admiral Wells's voice came through. Wright, what's your status? Escorting Princess Charlotte to her parents. Incident occurred as suspected. Witness confirmation obtained. Understood. Prince William is en route to the family quarters. Meet him there. They arrived at the private family wing to find William already there, pacing in the hallway. The moment he saw Charlotte, his entire demeanor shifted from controlled anger to immediate parental concern. He dropped to one knee. Charlotte, sweetheart, are you all right? Charlotte's composure finally broke. She ran to her father and wrapped her arms around his neck. Started crying in earnest, not loud sobs, quiet, exhausted tears that had been building for weeks. William held her, one hand cradling the back of her head. He looked up at Wright over Charlotte's shoulder. Thank you, he mouthed silently. Wright nodded, started to step back, give them privacy. Wait, William said aloud. He stood, lifting Charlotte with him. She buried her face in his shoulder. I need you to document everything that just happened. Every detail. Detective Inspector Chen is setting up in the security office. Yes, sir. And Wright. William's expression was granite. When this is done, when my daughter is settled, I'm going to deal with Camilla personally. But I need you to know that what you did today, you protected my child when she couldn't protect herself. That matters more than protocol, more than position, more than anything else. Kate appeared at the end of the hallway, concern written across her face. William carried Charlotte toward her, speaking quietly to his daughter as they walked. Wright stood alone in the corridor, feeling the weight of what had just happened settling over him. He directly countermanded the Queen Consort, removed a child from her presence, documented evidence of abuse. Either this would be the end of his career or the beginning of something much bigger. What he discovered next would prove it was both. If you're enjoying this story, drop a like and let us know in the comments. Would you have intervened the way Sergeant Wright did? Now, here's what happened when the evidence became undeniable. Wright spent the next 2 hours in the security office with Detective Inspector Chen. He provided his statement in painstaking detail, described exactly what he'd seen, the way Camilla's fingers had twisted in Charlotte's hair, the deliberate pull, Charlotte's gasp of pain, and the red marks on her scalp afterward. Chen recorded everything, asked clarifying questions, made Wright repeat certain details to ensure accuracy. The voice recording you made, she said. I'll need that as evidence. Wright handed over his phone. Everything's time-stamped. You'll hear Charlotte asking her to stop. Camilla refusing. The entire interaction. Chen downloaded the file, listened to it with headphones. Wright watched her expression harden as Camilla's voice came through, telling Charlotte to stop being dramatic, to tolerate discomfort. "This is clear-cut," Chen said finally. "Physical assault on a minor, psychological abuse, pattern of behavior. We have video evidence, audio evidence, witness testimony, and the victim's own statement." She paused. "Team, the challenge is going to be institutional resistance." "What do you mean?" "I mean, people are going to want this to go away quietly. They're going to suggest private resolution, no formal charges, just removing Camilla from contact with the children and hoping it doesn't become public." Wright felt his jaw tighten. "And Charlotte? She just has to live knowing nothing real happened to the person who hurt her?" "I didn't say I agree with that approach." Chen's voice was firm. "I'm saying it's what some people will push for, but Prince William seems determined to handle this properly. And that gives us room to operate." A knock on the door interrupted them. Captain Wells entered, followed by Princess Anne. Wright immediately stood. Anne's presence meant this had escalated to senior royal involvement, and she had a reputation for being direct, no-nonsense, and intensely protective of family. "Sergeant Wright," Anne said without preamble, "you've done something either very brave or very stupid, possibly both." "Ma'am." "Walk me through it. Everything." Wright repeated his account for the third time. Anne listened without interrupting. Her expression remained neutral until Wright described Charlotte's fear in the corridor earlier that morning. "She asked you if something could still be wrong, even when someone said it was normal," Anne said quietly. "She was testing, trying to see if anyone would validate her reality." "Yes, ma'am. That's my assessment as well." Anne turned to Chen. "What's your professional opinion? Not the political answer, the real one." "This is child abuse, ma'am. Clear, documented, repeated child abuse. If this were any other person in any other setting, they'd be arrested and charged. The fact that it's the Queen Consort doesn't change the nature of the crime. It just makes it more complicated to prosecute." Anne nodded slowly. "Good. I'm glad someone in this palace still understands that titles don't grant immunity from basic human decency." She looked back at Wright. "You're going to face consequences for this. Camilla has already made several calls. She's claiming you assaulted her, removed Charlotte without authorization, and fabricated evidence." Wright's stomach dropped. "Ma'am, I know you have evidence. William knows. Chen knows. But Camilla is fighting back, and she has resources." Anne's expression softened slightly. "However, she doesn't have my brother Charles. I've already spoken to him. Showed him the footage. He's dealing with it." "How is he dealing with it?" Wells asked carefully. "By being furious at his wife and ashamed that it happened under his roof. He wants to protect the institution. I want to protect Charlotte. William wants justice. Those three things are currently in conflict." Anne straightened. "But Charlotte comes first. Everything else is secondary." The palace moved into crisis management mode. Not the public kind with press statements and formal investigations. The private kind where doors closed, voices lowered, and decisions got made in rooms most people never saw. Wright was placed on temporary administrative leave. "Not a punishment," Wells assured him. "Protective measure. Keep him away from the center of the storm while things got sorted out." He spent 3 days in his apartment, waiting, checking his phone constantly, wondering if he'd destroyed his career for nothing. On the 4th day, Wells called him back to the palace. "Conference room 3, 1400 hours, dress uniform." Wright's hands shook slightly as he buttoned his jacket. Dress uniform meant something official, something final. Either he was being formally dismissed or formally recognized. No middle ground. He arrived 10 minutes early. The hallway outside conference room 3 was empty, silent. Wright stood at attention, waiting. At exactly 1400 hours, the door opened. Wells gestured him inside. The room was full. Prince William sat at the head of the table, Kate beside him, her expression serious. Princess Anne stood by the window. Detective Inspector Chen had files spread in front of her. And at the far end, King Charles sat with an expression Wright had never seen on his face before. Exhausted, aged, deeply sad. "Sergeant Wright," Charles said quietly. "Please, sit." Wright sat, his heart hammered against his ribs. Charles looked down at his hands for a moment. Then he spoke. "What happened to my granddaughter happened in my home, under my roof. That's unacceptable. Completely unacceptable." He paused. "Detective Inspector Chen has completed her investigation. The evidence is overwhelming. Queen Camilla deliberately and repeatedly caused physical pain to Princess Charlotte under the guise of correcting her appearance. The behavior was systematic, targeted, and intended to establish dominance over a child who couldn't fight back." Wright kept his expression neutral. But inside, he felt validation flood through him. He'd been right. Lynn Charlotte had been telling the truth. "Camilla has been removed from all contact with the grandchildren," Charles continued. "That restriction is permanent. She will not attend any family events where the children are present. She will not have access to their private quarters. She will not be alone with them, under any circumstances." Kate spoke for the first time. "Charlotte has started seeing a therapist who specializes in helping children process trauma. She's doing better, sleeping better. She knows what happened to her was wrong, that she wasn't imagining it, that she's safe now. The question," Anne said bluntly, "is what happens to Sergeant Wright? Camilla is demanding his dismissal. Claims he overstepped his authority, humiliated her, assaulted her by physically removing her from the room." Wright's stomach tightened. None of which is true," William said flatly. "Wright acted on my direct orders. He protected my daughter when she was in immediate danger. He did exactly what a royal protection officer is supposed to do." He looked directly at Wright. "You saved my daughter from months, possibly years, of ongoing abuse. You gave her the courage to finally tell us what was happening. I won't forget that." Charles nodded slowly. "Sergeant Wright, you're being transferred to a new position. Personal protection detail for Prince George. Promotion to Staff Sergeant. Immediate effect." Wright blinked. "Sir, I thank you." "Don't thank me. You earned it. You did your job when doing your job meant standing up to the Queen Consort. That takes courage most people don't have. The final moments of this story are unforgettable. Stay with us until the end." Now here's what happened when the truth came out. Chen leaned forward. "There's something else you should know, Sergeant. When we reviewed all the security footage from the past 6 months, we found 23 separate incidents. 23 times Camilla used physical pain to control or punish Charlotte. Most of them too brief or subtle to notice unless you knew what you were looking for. You noticed, you acted, you stopped it. 23 times. Wright felt sick. All those incidents Charlotte had endured alone. All those moments she'd been hurt and told it was normal. Told she was being dramatic. Told to stop complaining. "What about formal charges?" Wright asked. "Is she being prosecuted?" The room went quiet. Charles sighed heavily. "No, she's not." Wright's jaw tightened. "With respect, sir, if this were anyone else—" "I know." Charles held up a hand. "Believe me, I know. Detective Inspector Chen has made that abundantly clear. But prosecuting the Queen Consort creates complications that would ultimately hurt Charlotte more than help her. The media attention, the trial, Charlotte having to testify publicly, reliving it over and over. We decided," Kate said quietly, "that protecting Charlotte's privacy and letting her heal was more important than public justice. But Camilla is facing consequences. Real ones." And Anne elaborated. "She's being removed from several patronages. Her public schedule has been dramatically reduced. She's been informed that any future incidents of inappropriate behavior toward any child will result in complete removal from public life. The threat is real. She knows it. Most importantly, William added, Charlotte knows the truth. She knows what happened was wrong. She knows adults believed her. She knows she's safe. That matters more than anything else. Wright nodded slowly. He didn't entirely agree. Part of him wanted to see Camilla formally charged, publicly humiliated, punished in a way that matched the crime. But he understood the priority. Charlotte came first. There's one more thing, Charles said. He stood, walked to Wright, and extended his hand. Thank you for protecting my granddaughter, for being the person who saw what no one else saw, for having the courage to act. Wright shook his hand. Just doing my job, sir. No, you went far beyond your job. You risked your career, your reputation, everything, for a child you barely knew. That's not duty. That's character. The meeting concluded shortly after. Wright walked out of conference room 3 feeling strange, vindicated, promoted, but also aware that justice had been only partially served. He made his way through the palace corridors, heading toward the exit, lost in thought. Didn't notice the small figure waiting by the East Gallery until she spoke. Sergeant Wright, he turned. Charlotte stood there in a simple dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked different than the last time he'd seen her. Less tense, less afraid. Your Royal Highness? She walked closer, hesitated. Then she did something that surprised him. She reached out and took his hand. Just held it for a moment. Thank you, she said quietly, for believing me, for helping me. Wright knelt down so he was at her eye level. You were very brave, in telling me what was wrong, trusting me. That took a lot of courage. I was scared. I know, but you did it anyway. That's what bravery is. Charlotte smiled. A real smile, not the forced, polite one she'd worn before, a genuine expression of relief and happiness. Mum says you're going to be protecting George now. That's right. That's good. He'll like you. You're nice. She paused. Will I still see you around? Of course. I'm not going anywhere. Good. She squeezed his hand once more, then let go. I have to go. Mum's waiting, but I wanted to say thank you. She walked away, her steps lighter than they'd been in weeks. Wright watched her disappear around the corner, feeling something loosen in his chest. This was why he'd become a Royal Protection Officer. Not for the prestige, not for the uniform, for moments like this, and when doing the right thing actually made a difference. He thought about the past few weeks, the investigation, the confrontation, the aftermath. It hadn't been easy, it hadn't been comfortable. It had required him to challenge authority, risk his career, and trust his instincts over protocol. But Charlotte was safe now. That was what mattered. Wright left the palace that evening and walked through London as the sun set. The city moved around him. Millions of people living their lives, completely unaware of what had happened inside those palace walls. Most people would never know that a royal guard had stood up to the Queen Consort, that an 8-year-old princess had found the courage to tell the truth. That justice, imperfect as it was, had been served. But Wright knew, Charlotte knew, and that was enough. 3 months later, as Wright was settling into his new position protecting Prince George, the promotion came with increased responsibilities and longer hours, but he didn't mind. George was a good kid, energetic, curious, polite, and occasionally, during family events, Wright would see Charlotte. She'd smile at him, sometimes give a little wave. Her hair hung loose now. She didn't touch her scalp anymore. The nightmares had stopped, Kate had mentioned once. Healing took time, but she was healing. Camilla, meanwhile, had largely disappeared from public view. She still attended major state functions, but her role had been significantly diminished. The children were never present when she was. The separation was absolute. Wright never spoke publicly about what had happened. Signed confidentiality agreements ensured the details would never become tabloid fodder. Abby Charlotte deserved privacy, deserved the chance to move forward without constant reminders. But within Royal Protection Command, the story spread quietly. Not as gossip, as a lesson. About the real purpose of their job. About protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. About having the courage to act when action was needed, regardless of the cost. Captain Wells pulled Wright aside one afternoon, several months after the incident. "You know you've become something of a legend among the junior officers," Wells said, with a slight smile. "The guard who stood up to the Queen Consort. They're calling it the Wright Standard." The Wright Standard? Doing what's right, even when it's hard, even when it costs you, even when the person you're protecting is royalty, and the person you're protecting them from is also royalty. Wells paused. It's a good standard to set." Wright didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. Looking back, he thought about the moment he'd first noticed something was wrong. Charlotte walking past him with her eyes down. That small detail that had triggered everything else. How easy it would have been to ignore it, to tell himself it wasn't his business, to assume everything was fine because these were royals, and surely royals didn't hurt children. But he hadn't ignored it. He'd paid attention, he'd investigated, he'd acted. True duty wasn't about following orders blindly. It was about knowing when rules mattered less than doing what was right. It was about protecting those who needed protection, even when that meant challenging power, even when that meant risking everything. Wright had learned that lesson in the military, and had it reinforced during his years in Royal Protection. But he'd never truly understood it until the day an 8-year-old princess asked him if something could still be wrong, even when someone said it was normal. That question had changed everything. For Charlotte, for him, for how he understood his role. He wasn't just a guard, he was a protector. And sometimes protecting people meant protecting them from other people, who wore crowns and titles and smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Charlotte was safe now. That was what mattered. And if Wright ever saw those signs again, in any child, anywhere in the palace, he wouldn't hesitate, wouldn't second guess, wouldn't worry about the consequences. He'd act immediately, without question, because some things were more important than protocol, more important than politics, or more important than protecting institutions or reputations. Protecting children was one of those things, always. If this story showed you something about royal guards you didn't know, make sure you're subscribed to our channel. We share these untold stories from inside the palace every single day. Drop a comment below and tell us, would you have had the courage to do what Sergeant Wright did? Would you have challenged the Queen Consort to protect a child? We want to hear your thoughts. These stories matter because they remind us that real courage isn't about grand gestures or dramatic moments. It's about paying attention to small details, trusting your instincts, acting when action is needed, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's risky. Sergeant Thomas Wright did that. And because he did, Princess Charlotte got to be a child again. Got to feel safe again. Got to know that adults would believe her and protect her when she needed it most. That's the real story. Not the confrontation, not the investigation, not the consequences. The real story is that one person saw a child in pain and decided to do something about it. One person chose courage over comfort. One person made the right choice when the wrong choice would have been so much easier. We'll see you in the next one.